Did Freya and the carriage make it back safely? Xander asked anxiously, despite being able to feel that Freya was near from their bond. One of the guards nodded. Aye, they all made it back safe enough, though the carriage itself looked a bit like a pincushion, Atrax interjected, saying, Excellent. I'm glad they were able to make it back in one piece, but we have urgent information for Lord Haraven that we need to relay. The guard nodded again. Course well. Let us get the gate open and we'll let you be on your way. The four hurried their way through the estate until they reached the manor. The cart was haphazardly parked near the entrance, arrows and crossbow bolts still jutting from it. They made their way inside and up to Alessa's room, where loud sobs could be heard through the door. Xander could sense that Freya was behind the door. Opening the door, Xander saw Alessa, the source of the sobbing, with her face buried into Freya's chest, who was patiently allowing the young girl to use her fur to soak her tears. Graphus stood to one side, and Huron and Lord Haraven both stood in the room. The two men looked awkward, unsure exactly how to comfort the young woman. Gabriel and Fraze swiftly detached from the group to go comfort Alessa. Xander and Atrax learned what had happened once the cart had left the scene of the ambush. Once the horses had started running, they'd made it a few more streets towards the estate before two members of the Bone Daggers on horseback had attempted to intercept the carriage. Freya, having been sent with Carriage, had made sure that the attempt remained only an attempt by mauling both horses, swatting one of the riders so hard with her paw that he was thrown into a nearby building with a caved-in chest, and biting the other with such force that they were nearly bisected. She actually still had some blood dried around her mouth that she kept surreptitiously trying to clean off with her tongue. After that, the carriage had experienced no more attempts at interception. Once Alessa had been calmed somewhat and was no longer sobbing, just hiccuping slightly, Fraze made her way to Lord Haraven and quietly handed him the note she'd found on one of the corpses. As he read the note, his posture changed instantly. Gone was the awkward posture of a father unsure how to comfort a teenage child, replaced with his usual steely, businesslike demeanor. He had business he could attend to now. He motioned for the mercenaries to gather around him. Give me an hour and I'll have an elite team of 20 ready to hit the compound mentioned in the note. You've proven yourselves to be quite effective in combat, and as such, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to join in this raid. You will be compensated in addition to the contract you are already on, of course, should you wish to join. Alessa will be kept safe here by Huron until you return. I doubt that they'll be mounting another attempt for at least another couple of days anyway. Xander looked at his teammates. I'm in. I'm sick of these fuckers, and I'm still angry about being shot. Graphus nodded. Fraze chimed in with, If it pays as well as I hope it will, then I'm in too. The rest of the team responded with various other affirmations, even Freya giving a vigorous nod. So what kind of place is this compound, anyway? Xander asked. If I'm correct, it is an old warehouse near one of the docks in one of the less reputable areas of the city, Lord Haraven explained. Evidently, it is no longer being used to store traditional cargo, instead serving as space for the Bone Daggers to conduct operations. I don't know if it's their true lair, but a place such as this is bound to hold information and personnel of importance. Even if it doesn't, I'm quite keen to repay their efforts with some of my own. Xander nodded. If he was mad at this criminal group, he couldn't imagine how Haraven felt, considering they'd tried multiple times to kidnap his daughter. We've got an hour or so to prepare, then? Lord Haraven nodded. Good, because I have an idea. As Lord Haraven vacated the room to put together his raid team, Xander sat down on the ground and began creating a pile of leather and some sheets of glass. What are you doing, Xander? Gabriel asked, curious as to why he was filling the room with materials. I'm making some gas masks, he answered. Like I told you about for the itchweed smoke bombs. These will last for 24 hours away from me, so it'll be plenty of time for this raid. So I've got an hour to make 25 masks, planning to flood the place with the tear bombs as we breach, to make it harder for them to fight back. Gabriel nodded in understanding. I'll leave you to it then. Xander manically put together mask after mask, creating a leather face mask with 2 glass eyes and a steel filter on one side filled with activated charcoal. Once he'd created the first one, it was easy to duplicate 24 more. He didn't need one, as his helm already worked well enough. Next, he turned to the rune work, etching the required runes to force air to flow in through the activated charcoal and out through a small flap in the bottom of the mask. All in all, it took him about 45 minutes to do. His new Rune Lord class was already shining through as he found his speed at etching runes to be much faster than it had previously. Speaking of which, he should check and see if churning out 25 runed items had netted him anything. It was still level 1 after all. You have created runic arrays. Rune Lord leveled to 2. Rune Lord level 2 skills. Rune of shielding. Place a rune on a target within 30 feet, which will create a field that absorbs damage before shattering outwards, damaging enemies within 10 feet. Mana cost, medium. Cooldown. 1 minute. Xander was pleased to have leveled the class up so quickly, giving himself a small fist pump in celebration. Get something good? Fraze asked, having noticed him staring off into space, reading his status. Yeah, I leveled up my new class already, Xander said proudly. New class? Graphis said, not having been filled in that Xander had received a class amalgamation and had been considering his options for a replacement class to fill the empty slot. He got a class amalgamation and got to choose a new one because of it, Fraze quickly explained. Speaking of which, what did you pick? I went with Rune Lord. It seemed to go the best with what I already do. Runes have been really handy for me so far. Rune Lord? Graphis asked, eyes wide. That's a powerful class, Xander. Anything with a title like Lord, King, Baron, or something like that tends to offer much more mastery over an area than the average class. A rune carver of the same level, for example, likely just won't be able to do as much or create as powerful things as a Rune Lord. You chose well. That's good to know. It was the only one available to me with anything like that in the name. It's already given me access to a lot of runes and even information about runes that I'm going to need to go over and test when we finally have some downtime. Your growth has been quite impressive, Atrax commented. I guess the rumors of Godsmarked making up for their previous lack of levels so soon after arriving are true. Gabrielle clapped her hands together excitedly. Congratulations, Xander! Oh, maybe you can find some runes to help me heal people. I'm not sure yet what all I have access to, honestly, but I'll certainly keep my eye out for anything like that. Lord Haraven returned while they were still talking and looked questioningly at the pile of odd masks on the table near the door. The team is ready. You said you had an idea. Does it have something to do with those? He gestured towards the masks. It does, Xander replied. He began to explain his idea of flooding the warehouse with itchweed smoke and equipping the team with masks that would filter it out. Lord Haraven began to grin maliciously as the plan was laid before him. Yes, I think this will work nicely, Haraven commented. And it will provide an opportunity to take even more of these criminals alive. I need every bit of information I can get to stamp out this ring once and for all. They've threatened my family far too much to ever be allowed to exist in even the smallest of forms. Xander, let me check your shoulder before we head out again. You should have full range of motion after another quick healing, Gabrielle said. Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about it. Let me unbutton real quick. Xander undid the button on the camouflage blouse once again, baring his shoulder to the medic. Instead of reaching towards the injured shoulder with glowing hands again, though, she stared wide-eyed at his shoulder. Where is the bruise? She asked quietly. Xander looked down at his shoulder himself and saw that there was no trace of a bruise left. He rotated his shoulder carefully and found that it caused him no pain. Finally, he realized what had happened. Regenerative must not only increase his ability to heal injuries, but also the speed at which they healed. I didn't know regenerative did that. Handy. You have a trait that allows you to heal faster? Graphis asked, sounding jealous. I didn't know it also made me heal faster until just now, but it seems that way. Ugh, Godsmarked. You really do get some crazy stuff. Lord Haraven coughed. Time is of the essence for this raid. I suggest you gather your arms and armor and meet me by the gate. He turned on his heels and left the room. He's right, we should get moving, Atrax said. Give me a second to get my armor back on, and I'll be ready, Xander replied. Quickly donning his plate carrier and armor again, he turned to Freya. You be good and stay here with Alessa, okay, Freya? Make sure nothing happens to her. The big cat let out a sad yowl. She didn't like being left behind. I know, girl, but you'd just end up with itchweed in your eyes, and neither of us want that. Freya grumbled a slight growl in protest but settled down next to Alessa. She likes to snuggle, Xander told the teen. Arriving at the gate, the mercenaries saw Lord Hraven in front of a group of well-armed and armored guards. Even from this distance, Xander could tell they were a cut above the average guard he'd seen. They were all dressed in full-plate mail and carried shields and maces. As they drew closer, he was able to hear that Hraven was explaining how they would be joining in the raid, that Xander would be hitting the building with tear bombs, and that masks had been created for them. Reaching the group of elite guards, Xander handed one of them the masks. He'd stuffed them into a pillowcase he'd found in a cupboard in Alessa's room. "I made them thin so they should fit under a helm," he said to the guard. Soon the masks had been distributed and put on, straps adjusted properly. Xander had tested the fitment on a few of them once his teammates had put them on and was pleased enough with the seal. The group, now 26 strong, began a brisk pace towards the warehouse that they would be raiding. The few people on the streets at this late hour quickly scuttled out of the way of the large group. Their pace slowed as they neared the dock that the warehouse was situated next to. The elite guard force as well as the mercenaries began to creep along walls and avoid as many lines of sight as possible as they approached the warehouse. Once they reached one of the exterior walls of the warehouse, the lead guard stopped, holding his hand up for everyone else to halt as well. Silently, they motioned for Xander to come to the front. "We're near a door," the guard, who turned out to be a woman under all that plate, whispered. "You'll lead with your smoke thing, and we'll pile in after." "Okay, just one thing, though," Xander whispered back. "I'll throw a flashbang in, too, to disorient anyone near the door while the smoke grenade starts. Once the bright flash and loud bang go off, you're clear to breach." The lead guard nodded. "Understood. The door's just around the corner. Doesn't seem like anyone's guarding it from the outside." They began gathering around the doorway, and Xander was glad the building had no windows to speak of. He tested the handle of the door carefully, seeing if it was locked. Unfortunately, it was. Time to put unstoppable force to the test. Summoning a tear grenade in one hand and flashbang in the other, Xander lifted his foot up and kicked the door as hard as he could. The thin wooden door flew open immediately, and Xander chucked the two grenades into the building, activating the runes on them as he did so. Yells of confusion began to ring out as those who were near the doorway inside were blinded by the bright light and startled by the loud noise. The group of guards immediately blitzed into the building, and Xander heard even more yells as the sounds of battle began to ring out. Once the guards had entered, Xander and the other mercenaries followed. Xander began throwing more tear grenades throughout the large open building, and soon the space was flooded with the irritating smoke as the surprised yells and curses soon turned to hacking coughs. Drawing his mace and pulling his shield from his inventory onto his other arm, he began to prowl through the smoke, and his teammates spread out around him. He noticed Fraze and Atrax form a pair as they engaged a burly man with a wooden club, Atrax curling a flaming rope around the man as he began screaming. Gabriel appeared to be sticking close to him, and he was glad to have someone to watch his back in the smoky room. Graphus had immediately peeled off and raced towards the first figure he'd seen, slamming his shield into them and then punching them repeatedly. Xander engaged a thin, disheveled woman wielding a rapier. Judging by her state of relative undress, she must have been awoken by the commotion and rushed to the fight. Xander took a slash from the rapier on his bone shield and swept at her legs with his mace. He could hear the bones crunching as the runes, now also empowered by his new class, activated on the mace, magnifying the impact. Her leg was knocked into her other leg by the force of the blow, toppling the woman to the ground as she screamed in pain. Xander moved on, and Gabriel followed. He doubted that she'd be getting very far with a broken leg. She'd be rounded up with the rest of the captured syndicate members. The raid was over quickly, and as the smoke cleared, aided by one of the guards who had access to some wind-based abilities, the figures of dead, wounded, and captured criminals were revealed. The group of mercenaries reconvened in one corner, while the guards began herding, or in the case of those with injuries like the woman Xander had engaged, dragging the criminals that were still alive into another corner. Most had to be led to where they were going, barely able to see through the tears and irritation that persisted even after the smoke had cleared. 15 minutes later, The warehouse was absolutely packed with city guard as they processed, interrogated, and healed to consciousness the criminals. The mercs left them to their business, deciding to head back to the estate with the more elite guards that had participated in the raids. Lord Haraven was personally waiting for the mixed group of mercenaries and guards at the gate when they arrived. The guard that had spoken to Xander before they'd breached the warehouse door informed the Lord of how the mission had gone. Though he couldn't quite hear the conversation, Xander could tell that Haraven was pleased at the results he was hearing. Once Lord Haraven had finished debriefing his team of guards, he made his way over to the 5 mercs. Latana tells me that your idea with the smoke was instrumental in them being able to capture as many members of the Bone Daggers as they did. Xander wasn't sure who Latana was, but assumed that it must be the name of the woman who had just been speaking to Lord Haraven. You have my thanks, and my assurance that there will be a hefty bonus added to your contract payment in recognition of your work on this raid. Ah, thank you, Mr. Lord Haraven. Xander had never called anyone a lord before he'd come to this world and stumbled a little bit, remembering that the man likely expected people to use his official title. I'm just glad things went as well as they did and we were able to help. Lord Haraven did not react to Xander's stumble over his title, instead opting to nod his head in response. With any luck, these captured criminals will be able to lead us to other areas controlled by the Bone Daggers, which will lead to more captures and so on and so forth. I have hope that this event will be like removing the keystone from an arch for the Bone Daggers, and the group will begin to crumble. If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.